Uh-huh. I just feel like I've been around the block, ripping up fantasy stock, working around the clock. Look at the view from the top. Researching rookies a lot? No, I just be listening to pods, yeah. One in particular, I'm just a messenger, let me just pass on the rock. Browning, brunning, pruning, pronouncing ain't what he's doing. What he's doing is not losing, but infusing you with new things. And there's Dennis the Bennett, yeah. The man is a menace, yeah. Building a dynasty, some of the finest things. Promise you, you won't regret it. Sly as a fox, cultured in pop. Give him his props. Here is a thought, here is a box. And you cannot compare them at all, so don't even try. Careful with the news, but when you use a take, I take up Tony Fire. I mean Dyer, because anyone else is a huge mistake. Whoa, fantasy round table, fantasy round table. Yeah. Fantasy round table, come take a look at the crown, baby. Hey, fantasy round table, fantasy round table. Woo. Fantasy round table, come take a look at the crown, baby. Go.
Hello and welcome to another episode of the Fantasy Football Roundtable Podcast. It's Tuesday, December 31st, the final day of 2024. All of our fantasy championships are in the books, or at least they should be. If you are rolling the dice with the Week 18 championship, please feel free to
good luck.
Why? Week 17 ended up being dicey enough. A lot of players getting shut down for the year or being out. I ended up in 10 finals, 2 redraft, 8 dynasty, and I ended up going 8-2, 2-0 in redraft, and 6-2 in dynasty. I actually ended up winning both of our show leagues, both redraft and dynasty. And I'll be honest, I did not think I had a snowball's chance in our redraft league. I was down, I think I told you yesterday going into Monday night, I was down like 70 points facing Juwan Jennings with my 3 Lions, but that ended up working out for me.
Yeah. Jennings, you know, despite San Fran putting up a decent amount of points, he didn't have a super big scoring game.
No, Purdy only had eyes for Ricky Pearsall for most of that game.
He did. Yeah, 10 targets to Pearsall. I mean, Jennings had 10 targets. It was all 7 for 67.
He got a lot of targets when Dobbs came in. I started to get a little more nervous right after Dobbs came in. I think he completed 3 and targeted him in the end zone. Fortunately, Dobbs did me a massive favor and ran that touchdown in himself. Right. So no one was happier than me, and their kicker could not make a onside kick. But we will look at that.
He was, as the kids would say, moody.
Yeah. We will look at that game here in a minute. We're going to go through all the rest of the games from 3 days of action on Saturday, Sunday, and Monday. The first of those Saturday games, the Los Angeles Chargers moved to 10-6 with a 40-7 victory over the New England Patriots. Ladd McConkey continues something of a breakout season. Had 8 receptions for 94 yards and 2 touchdowns. We thought he would have a chance to be a contributor when he was drafted, but is he looking like he can be the Chargers' number 1?
It sure looks like it. He finished the season, the fantasy season, as wide receiver 12. Heading into next year, he's got chemistry with Justin Herbert. They have questions at just about every other skill position. Running back, who's it going to be? Are they going to bring Dobbins back? Are they going to see if Haskins and Vidal can kind of flourish as a duo? Will Joshua Palmer and Quentin Johnston get pushed down the pecking order further because they bring in a veteran or another hotshot rookie? You know, I don't know how far you can go with Will Dissly and Stone Smart at tight end. You know, they have some pieces. We've seen Herbert throw for a lot of yards early in his career. They picked up the pace a little bit after the first few weeks. The first 4 weeks of the season, I think his attempts his high attempt was 27 passes. The rest of the season, he only had 2 games under 30 pass attempts. So they picked up the pace. That bodes well for McConkey. I think he's shown that he's going to be He's probably like right now in early ADP, he's landing around wide receiver 15. So late second, early third round pick. If people start skewing towards, heavy running back in dynasty or heavy wide receiver in dynasty startups, he could move up earlier into the second, depending on what teams do or what the Chargers do to build around Herbert and McConkey. He may move up even a little bit more.
Meanwhile, for those of us who played Ramondre Stevenson, I know you feel this pain. 2 carries for 1 yard, 1 target, no receptions, essentially benched for Antonio Gibson. Been a weird season for him. He seems to kind of be on the outs with Jerod Mayo. Whether or not he comes back could be a question at the end of this disastrous season. But how are you feeling about Ramondre going forward?
So he's a talented player. Let me see if, it wasn't, but what? He's going into year 5 now. In 2022, he caught 69 passes and rushed for over 1,000 yards. He signed a contract extension. He signed through 2028, which, doesn't mean a lot, but that's what the contract terms are. And those aren't void years. But after 2025, his dead cap is just $6 million. A lot of that seems like pocket change compared to what some of these other teams have been eating. So he has to get the fumbling under control. That's been the big thing. They have a good quarterback and a solid tight end. They need offensive line help, and they need a bona fide stud at wide receiver. So looking at that, you've got Stevenson under contract. You've got Gibson. I don't know that I'm going to focus a lot of my resources on different running backs if I'm Jerod Mayo and the Patriots. So it feels like he's just going to need to use the offseason to put in work himself out of the doghouse. He's a significantly better running back than Antonio Gibson, in my opinion. I think he's going to be fine. I don't know that he's going to be a target unless I can, buy him cheap and maybe put him at my RB3. But I don't know that people will be wanting to sell him at that cost.
The middle game on the Saturday triple header, an overtime battle, the Bengals getting the 30-24 victory. In coming back and tying that game up in regulation, the Broncos utilized second-year wide receiver Marvin Mims Jr. We had hoped for a huge second year. Wasn't really a factor early on, but has been coming on of late. 8 for 103 and 2 big touchdowns, including a 51-yard bomb. Do you think this is a positive sign building momentum for 25?
Anything is a positive sign for Marvin Mims. He was so deep in Sean Payton's doghouse, it wasn't even funny. But he seems to have found his way out. And I think this is a great example for Ramondre Stevenson to take a look at. Not that Jerod Mayo has the same kind of cachet as Sean Payton, but Mims, he has some skills that the other receivers in Denver don't, which is he's probably their fastest receiver.
Yeah.
So he's an asset.
Maybe Franklin. I don't know. They bomb it to Franklin too.
So Mims is an asset in that regard. It seems like they were playing him the last 4 or 5 games. He had 4 targets in 6 of the last 7 games, 4 or more, and ended up with a season-high 8 targets last week. He needs to separate himself from Devon Vele and Troy Franklin and Little Jordan Humphrey. They had, between those 4, I think they ranged from like 43 to 50 or 43 to 50 or 55 receptions. So there's Cortland Sutton, who in a Joe Lombardi offense is going to get a lot of targets, But the rest of them, somebody needs to separate. And it feels like Mims might end up being that guy because he can play outside and inside. And then Vele may end up taking that big slot role. I like Mims. I'm not – he hasn't moved into I want to count on this guy yet, but it does look promising.
On the other side, T. Higgins, 11 for 131 and 3 touchdowns. A lot of chance and discussion that people want him back next year. Higgins came out and said he would be willing to take less money to come back. We didn't really see that come to fruition this offseason when he had the franchise tag. What do you give the chances that Higgins is back in Cincinnati in 25?
It's a challenging situation because they do have Jamar Chase coming up next year. They've got to pay. And if they're going to pay Burrow and Chase and Higgins, they're going to end up like the 2024 Detroit Lions. If we're going to win, it's going to be because we're outscoring people. They're going to need to have a defensive coordinator.
That's already what they're doing now.
Yeah, they're going to need to bring in or have Lou Anarumo making chicken salad out of chicken feathers every week. The 2025 franchise tag, according to overthecap.com, is predicted to be around $26 million. I don't know that they franchise tag him again because it'll be that plus 10% because they franchise tagged him this year. Him and Burrow and Chase and Taylor, everybody's saying all the right things. The challenge is that the Browns are notoriously cheap, in part because the Bengals are the family business. A lot of these other owners have other businesses that make millions or billions of dollars. And so when they have to pay a big contract and put a bunch of money in escrow, they can take it from somewhere else. The Browns don't have that luxury. I like T. Higgins as a talent. He's wide receiver 19 this year with the missed games he had, but he was wide receiver 3 in points per game. Like it was Chase, I think Jefferson, and Higgins. Those were your top 3 in points per game. So he's clearly a talented player. How much less is he going to take? Is he going to take 22? Well,
Yeah, I think there's a lot of joyous sentiment now. We'll see what happens with Cincinnati. I kind of put the likelihood of him back in Cincinnati at around 25%. Maybe we'll go higher, but
if they make the playoffs and even win a game in the playoffs, I could see the whole let's run it back mentality setting in.
I feel like I'll take less money to play there is the kind of goodwill you build up with the fan base right before you take a big money deal elsewhere and just say, oh, that it didn't work out. And no one would be surprised that Cincinnati didn't offer a lot. I mean, we know they've had some problems. The final game of Saturday saw the Los Angeles Rams beat the Arizona Cardinals 13-9. Surprisingly low scoring, surprisingly close, but the Rams do end up clinching the NFC West thanks to all the combination of factors that happened over the weekend. Trey McBride, 16 targets, caught 12 for 123, finally got that passing touchdown. Is he moving up to tight end 1 in your dynasty rankings?
It's going to be close between him and Brock Bowers. Bowers had 247.7 points, Kittle 231.9, McBride 230.3. It only would have taken 2 or 3 more touchdowns for, if McBride scored 4 more touchdowns, he'd be the tight end 1 on the year. Thanks, Kyler Murray. He's definitely a talented player. I think next year we're going to see Marvin Harrison Jr. take a big leap. I don't know if that means because they changed their scheme or they recognize, hey, we didn't use this player right a lot of the time. They've extended Connor. They like Trey Benson. They like Michael Wilson and Greg Dortch. They probably will bring Zay Jones back. So it could limit his targets on the season overall some if Harrison takes a big step, because we know Kyler Murray isn't going to throw for 4,000 yards. That's just not what he does. So that may limit McBride in the yardage situation, but he may get more touchdowns. If he can put up 6 or 7 or 8 touchdowns, it may offset the lower yardage and the little bit lower receptions. I'm probably still going to have Bowers at number 1. He produced phenomenal numbers as a rookie with the Garbage Pail Kids at quarterback, and I think that warrants him staying at number 1. But I'll definitely have McBride number 2 in Dynasty.
Meanwhile, for the Rams, the last couple of weeks have been rough sledding for Cooper Kupp. Not getting near as many targets. Puka Nacua got 14 targets on Saturday, only 3 for Kupp. Only had 1 reception for 29 yards. What do you think's going on there?
I think Father Time remains undefeated. He's going to be, what is he? I think he's 31 or going to be 31. He's had 4 right ankle sprains, 2 of which have been high ankle sprains since October of 22, tore his right ACL in 2018. It's one of those things where he still has value. The downside is they use him and Nacua in almost the exact same way, and Nacua is just outperforming him at such a high rate. Kupp has been an afterthought since Nacua got healthy, and it's part of that is Matthew Stafford is on the sunset of his career as well. He's not quite what he used to be. He's not gonna throw the ball 50 or 60 times like he may have done early in his career. And Kyren Williams stayed healthy all year, pretty much. He missed 2 games, I think. He was pretty healthy most of the year, and he eats up carries and he's productive. And so it just kind of came down to there's only so much football to share, and Puka Nacua took the lion's share of it this year. I would expect it to continue to be like that next year. You never know. Nacua has had his own injury issues as well, so he may miss more time again next year, opening up the door for Cooper Kupp. But right now, it certainly seems like Nacua is the guy joining Matthew Stafford in the Breakfast Club.
On to the Sunday games. Buffalo Bills hosting the New York Jets, got the 40-14 victory. Aaron Rodgers, a limp 12 of 18, 112 yards and 2 interceptions before getting yanked for Tyrod Taylor. Jets are 4-12. Rodgers doesn't seem to be getting along with anyone. Is this the end of him with the Jets?
So did he get yanked or did he pull himself? I mean, it almost feels like he's like, I'm going to go take some ayahuasca, let Taylor finish this up.
Either way.
He's just been a shit show this year. I think it's time for him to head into that dark room and stay. He looks shot. He looks immobile. He's been inaccurate. Every time he completes a pass to Davante Adams, we all have flashbacks to Green Bay and what it used to be. But it's just not it. I don't know if cripple's the right word. That might be too strong, but he certainly limits what that offense can do when you've got Breece Hall and Braylon Allen and Davante Adams and Garrett Wilson. And some of that is the offensive line. They need to stay healthy and improve. But Rodgers, he seems like he's lost it. It feels like if I'm a head coach, I'm not going there to try to coach him.
No, I think he should be done after this season, but we will see.
I mean, he's had a foot out the door for a couple years. I get it. It's hard to turn down that much money.
Meanwhile, Amari Cooper, we saw a sighting. He had 3 receptions for 56 yards and a touchdown. His trade to come over to Buffalo seemed like a big deal. He had a couple of good games, but he hasn't been a huge impact player for them. Should be on the open market after the season. What are you thinking about Cooper?
I feel like it's time to move on. If I'm rostering him in Dynasty, I'm going to look to include him in a package for an upgrade at whatever position I'm looking at. But could he bounce back next year? He could. He's going to be a free agent. He's going to be 31. He's always been a pretty good route runner, but he does have the tendency to disappear. I don't know if going somewhere like Buffalo, where you have a quarterback that can do all of the things that he can do, is beneficial to Amari Cooper. He needs a quarterback that's kind of immobile, that isn't going to run around a lot, that's accurate, that's well protected so that Cooper has time to get open. But it feels, I would say I don't think we see a wide receiver 2 season out of Cooper moving forward.
Next up, the Raiders went to New Orleans, got the 25-10 victory. Dennis, Amir Abdullah, once a pretty promising prospect for the Lions, didn't really work out there, has bounced around, but he's having a pretty good season. Had 20 carries for 115 yards for the Raiders on Sunday, caught 3 passes for 32. He has, over 300 yards rushing on 60 carries this year, but more than 40 receptions this season. How are you feeling about him as maybe an off-season stash?
I'm not into it. He had 3 double-digit games to finish the season. 4 of his last 6 were double-digit games. One of them was a negative 0.02 or 0.2 points. He's 31 years old, and it feels like fool's gold to me. He's on a team that's a hot mess, and we see it on a relatively regular basis where a team is just a cluster, and they've got to give the ball to somebody. Somebody steps up, whether it's a quarterback or a running back or a wide receiver. Somebody has a good fantasy season. Don't fall for it. It's he might provide some appeal to teams looking for a pass catching option next year, but he's not going to turn into Alvin Kamara all of a sudden. He's probably the wide receiver 3 or 4 on a team next year, who's going to need an injury or 2 to get relevance again. But a contender isn't going out saying, we're a pass catching running back away and we're going to target this 31-year-old to be if I'm targeting a 31-year-old wide receiver, running back, it's Alvin Kamara, who's not quite 31, but.
Meanwhile, Kendre Miller getting another audition, but only 3 carries for 3 yards, only 1 reception for 16 yards. Clyde Edwards-Helaire, who got signed off the street, had 2 more carries and 1 more reception on 3 more targets than Miller. How are you feeling about him long-term?
So Kendre Miller has 10 carries or more twice in 14 career games over 2 seasons. Every now and again, he'll flash a little bit. And I know he was in the doghouse with Dennis Allen for a year and a half, but I'm not sure that it feels like we're going to be looking at him when he's 30 years old as another Amir Abdullah. He's got good size. He can run the ball okay. He just doesn't – I don't think he has the consistency to get there. There were questions about him coming out of college. He transferred once or twice to avoid competition. I like the physical profile. It kind of reminds me of who was that? There was a Christian Michael, good athletic running back who just is never able to put it together at the NFL level because there's just some shortcoming. And in Miller's case, it seems the shortcoming seems to be a hangnail lands him on IR.
Meanwhile, the Indianapolis Colts went to New York to play the Giants with a playoff slot on the line, and the Giants get the 45-33 victory. I'll get to the Colts in a minute, but first, what the hell are the Giants doing? This win dropped them from the number 1 overall pick, where they could actually finally get a quarterback, to the number 4 pick going into the last week.
Players don't tank. They're playing for jobs. They're playing for pride. They don't care about the draft pick next year. They want to put good film on tape. They want to do well. And, Drew Lock, he's trying to get, he wasn't a first round pick, was he?
Second round pick.
Second round. So he's trying to which is still pretty good draft capital. He's trying to get back to that where, I think he feels like he may have gotten the short shaft a little bit, but he also wasn't playing very well. He wants to prove he's not, bad Jameis Winston. And when you've got Malik Neighbors, it's pretty easy to do. Let me see what they gave him 8 targets. He had 171 yards and 2 touchdowns on 7 catches. It was just one of those things where everything kind of comes together against a defense. I got to be honest, I really needed more production out of Tyrone Tracy than I did Malik Neighbors, because all of my Neighbors teams were not contending.
He's really fallen off down the stretch as a runner.
Tracy, yeah. And it's not surprising. Teams are the Giants have lost, their best offensive line. I think their top 2 offensive linemen to injury. They've lost, 2 quarterbacks, neither of which were very good ahead of Locke. It's kind of it's one of those teams. This was a year that it's a hot mess. Would anybody be surprised if this was Tracy's best year of his career? Probably not. Seems like he's got some explosiveness, some good vision, some pop, but he also doesn't feel like he's a game changer at this point. I think the Giants, they were playing to salvage some pride, and they're taking whatever shots they can, and they got one over on the Colts.
Meanwhile, when Adonai Mitchell was drafted this offseason, we thought it might write an end to any fantasy relevance for Alec Pierce, but he said, hold my beer. He's had 35 receptions for 767 yards and 6 touchdowns so far this season, averaging almost 22 yards a reception. Does this get you back in on Pierce as he heads into a contract here in 2025?
It feels like Pierce is pre-2024 Jameson Williams. He's big, he's fast. If things break the right way, he's going to put up 20 fantasy points because he catches a few passes, a touchdown, and puts up a lot of yards. The biggest issue Indianapolis has is at quarterback. Until Anthony Richardson can operate a passing game at an NFL level, there's going to be inconsistency all over. I mean, Michael Pittman, I think he was like wide receiver 40 or 50 something coming into this game. Joe Flacco comes in, and Flacco hasn't been great since he came back. He's been fairly mediocre. He just throws the ball with enough volume that he's able to get some plays and make up for it. I wouldn't be surprised if Pierce or Pittman are like going, hey, if I appreciate that you're all in on Anthony Richardson, but I got bills to pay and money to make. I wouldn't mind getting the hell out of here while you guys figure out how you're going to build an offense around that guy. Well,
Pittman's on a long-term contract, so you figure he's going to stay. But Pierce, it'll be interesting. He was a 2022 draft pick, so and a second-round pick, so his either second or third round. So he goes into a contract year next year. I'll be curious to see what happens. The Cowboys went to Philadelphia, and it was not much of a game. Eagles winning 41-7. The Cowboys are 7-9, well out of it. Should they give Trey Lance a look in Week 18?
Look, they probably should have given him a look a while ago. And if they haven't given him a look yet, they're not going to give him a look. I don't know what one game shows. If you're going to give Trey Lance a look, you need to do it over the span of 3 or 4 games so you can get some idea, is he improving? Is he taking the coaching he's getting based on his performance in the game? You're not going to get that from one game. So I feel like, I don't know. The Trey Lance signing is every bit as peculiar as the Zeke Elliott signing, whom they announced they were cutting today.
It wasn't even a signing. They had to trade a decent mid-round pick to acquire Lance and have done nothing with him. I find the whole thing curious.
Yeah, I think if you haven't done it, it feels like Lance is a lost cause at this point.
Yeah. Meanwhile, Kenny Pickett, who, trying to rebuild his career here in Philly, gets the start for Jalen Hurts. 10 of 15, 143 yards, had a nice long touchdown pass to Devonta Smith. Also ran one in for a touchdown. What do you think of him?
Meh. I think he is developing into a serviceable backup. I don't know that I want him starting more than a game for my team. I don't think he can hold up to the pressure of being a regular starter. I think he's, one pass attempt away from doing his progressive backup commercial.
Next up, the Carolina Panthers went to Tampa Bay, and the Buccaneers got the 48-14 victory. Another big game for Adam Thielen, the veteran, with 5 receptions, 110 yards, 2 touchdowns. Is he try to sell high this offseason? Are you still holding him? He still seems to have good chemistry with Bryce Young and be kind of the best anchor receiver there.
It's hard to figure out what the value is because he is performing, but he did get injured. He'll be 35 at the start of next season. He only has $5 million in dead cap if they want out after the 2024 year. It feels like Carolina needs might not be the right word, but when you've got Leggett and Coker, you've got these young guys, the Sanders and Tremble and Hubbard and Young, it feels like they need to have somebody like Adam Thielen. I don't think he is going to be a detriment to their salary cap to keep him next year, but I don't know how much I'm going to invest in him moving forward. How many, I'm not. Would it surprise me if he got extended by a year or two? Probably not. But
he is under contract in 2025. It would only be $5 million dead cap to hit, but it's not a big cap number to keep him. His base salary only $4 million. Looks like a total cap hit of around 8.4. So I wouldn't be surprised financially.
It feels like if you're trying to build a culture, which Canales is, he seems like a good guy to have. So it wouldn't surprise me if his agent goes in and is trying to get, hey, we got 1 year left on this. Let's tack a year on the end of it. Let's tack 2 years on, and try and extend him to help build the culture. But I don't know how long he's going to be able to hold up at 35 years old, what I really expect from him as a receiver. The athleticism, when it goes, man, it goes. And it's not like he's a little tiny guy. He's a good sized fella.
Meanwhile, for the Buccaneers, Rashad White had a pretty amazing year for fantasy in 2023, but this year he's been surpassed by Bucky Irving as both a runner and as a receiver. We've seen Sean Tucker getting involved too. White's will be on the last year of his rookie deal in 25, so I doubt that they would move on because it doesn't cost a lot to keep him. But how are you feeling about his long-term value?
Feels like he's trying to become the next Alvin Kamara. The difference is that Kamara actually is a pretty decent inside runner and has a nose for the end zone. White's got good size. He's a phenomenal pass catcher, but he doesn't have great vision on interior runs. And that's kind of always been his ding. And we've seen Bucky Irving has phenomenal vision and looks like the real deal. It feels like a keep the band together kind of thing. We've got White that's got this skill set, and we've got Irving, and there's an overlap there. We've got Tucker who can fill in basically for either one of them, and so there's not a big cash investment in any of the three of them at this point. With Baker and Evans and Godwin, you've got a lot more high dollar stuff. So it feels like they're going to keep rolling with these running backs. I just feel like White is going to become the secondary guy because Irving is capable enough in the passing game that they don't swap him out.
Yeah, and see, that's the thing I think that helped Kamara a lot when he was paired with other running backs like a Mark Ingram. That guy was going to pound it on the ground, but he wasn't in there for receiving. And the fact that we've seen Bucky Irving take over such a large share of receiving work would give me pause. I think if you were relying on White as a starter this year, I would probably make some alternative plans for 2025.
I'm not going to argue with that at all.
The Jacksonville Jaguars hosted the Tennessee Titans and got the 20-13 victory. Tyjae Spears getting to step in as a starter with Tony Pollard out. In his second year, he's taken a little bit of a step back. He has not been available for as many games. He has not seen quite as many carries, but only averaging 3.7 yards per carry, was 4.5 last year. Had 52 receptions as a rookie, only 30 so far this season. How are you feeling about Spears?
He's a talented guy. He's got good quickness. He's got good vision. He probably has an RB2/RB3 ceiling, because I think his health is going to really be an issue. He's 5'9", 201. He doesn't have bell cow size. We're seeing more of these 200-pounders that are a little bit dense. The pendulum has swung back a little bit towards those guys. The biggest issue I have with Tyjae Spears is he's got that knee with no cartilage and the arthritic condition. It's very similar to Jay Ajayi's knee. And we saw him just, he was good and then he couldn't walk. And so I think we're, a couple of years away from Spears having that same type of thing. And any smart team that rosters him is going to be cognizant of that. And while they're comfortable with his knee right now, they're always going to be looking to pair him with somebody to help ease that workload. And yes, when you get into a situation where one of your guys gets injured, you may load him up with carries for a game or two, but I don't think we're ever going to see a Kyren Williams type workload for Tyjae Spears.
Meanwhile, for the Jaguars, another quietly great game for Brian Thomas Jr. We had the big three receivers in rookie drafts with Neighbors and Odunze and Marvin Harrison. There wasn't really a consensus for a guy behind that. Some people lean Thomas, some Worthy, some other guys. But Brian Thomas has quietly had a pretty incredible year for a dumpster fire of a Jaguars team. 80 receptions, 1,179 yards, and 10 touchdowns so far. Has he quietly been maybe the best of the rookie wide receivers?
Oh, he hasn't been quiet. He's been the best of the rookie wide receivers. He's a wide receiver 4 on the year. It's wild. If you look at the top 12, or even let's go top 10 wide receivers in points scored this year. There are 4 receivers from LSU and 3 from Ohio State in the top 10. You got Chase, Jefferson, Thomas, Malik Neighbors, and then you have Jackson Smith and Jigba, Terry McLaurin, and Garrett Wilson. Like, that's crazy for me to look at that and go, holy cow. Like, I was a little nervous about Brian Thomas because we had Jamar Chase come in. We had Justin Jefferson come in. Then we had Malik Neighbors, I think, had the better pedigree coming in this year. And so I felt like, I just feel like I can't put my eggs in that another LSU receiver being that good. So sadly, I only have, I think, 1 share of Brian Thomas Jr. in Dynasty. But he's been phenomenal. And if they can get either Trevor Lawrence to play close to the hype or a quarterback that can, play well on a consistent basis, then we may see him up there for, 10 years putting up these kind of numbers. But it's crazy to think in the top 12, there's 3 rookie wide receivers in the top 12 with Thomas at 4, Neighbors at 6, and McConkey at 12.
Yeah, and it's not even been like, a lot of the rookies have been bad. It's just he's been so good.
Right.
Next up, Miami Dolphins went to Cleveland, or the Cleveland Browns. Wait, it was in Cleveland? Yes, 20-3 victory for the Dolphins. We mentioned before,
that close.
With Tua Tagovailoa as your quarterback, you want to have some kind of a solid backup. Miami went out and acquired Tyler Huntley. He ended up having to play on Sunday, 22 of 26, 225 yards and a touchdown, had 7 carries, 52 and a touchdown. We saw him for a number of years be kind of the backstop to Lamar Jackson, who missed quite a bit of time. Do you think he could be a good fit to backstop Tua in Miami going forward?
Yes and no. Yes, because, I do think that, his ceiling is really good backup. The no is that his style is just different than Lamar or Tua. It's more similar to Lamar. I guess if you put Tua and Lamar on a spectrum, it's going to be on the Lamar side, not close to Lamar. Lamar's a unicorn, but it would be on that side. It feels to me like when I started putting my notes together for this, initially I was like, career backup. But then I realized he's right at that same age where Tyrod Taylor went from playing in 14 games over 4 years with 0 starts to being the Buffalo Bills starter and playing pretty well for 3+ years. So is somebody going to be willing to give Huntley an opportunity? Given the quarterback landscape, I wouldn't rule it out. He's a decent athlete, 7 rushes for 52 yards against Cleveland with a touchdown.
I think he is in that career backup. I have a hard time I have an easier time believing that Mac Jones will get another chance than.
So my second note on Huntley was he's going to need the starter to get injured for him to get an opportunity to play. And then he's going to need that starter to be out for several weeks, not just 1 or 2 weeks. He needs an 8 or 9 game run filling in for an injured starter, I think, to give a team confidence enough to bring him in and let him compete as a starter for a starting position.
Meanwhile, the Browns, they didn't do much on the field, but off the field, they reworked the deal with Deshaun Watson, pretty well guarantees he's in there at his good salary in 2025, but maybe gives some hope for the future. What do you think about the updated contract?
I mean, 2025 dead cap is $173 million. 2026 dead cap is $99 million. what basically the Browns are gonna have. They're just. I don't know where they are in that. They're like, hey, we should still keep. You got to pay him. It doesn't matter if you play him or whatnot. He's not good anymore. He's got significant baggage. I don't know what he looks like as a locker room guy anymore. It feels to me like it's like, look, let's just move on already. We made a huge error. Let's cut our losses. We're not going to give him any more money on top of this, but there's no way we can get out of this. Let's send him on his way to go off into the sunset and start getting his massages, and we'll just be done with it, and we'll try to rebuild this team.
Yeah, you probably have at least 2 more years, but they could swallow the 26.9 to get out in 27.
Right, but even so, the point is if you're not going to play him, it doesn't matter if you play. You got to pay him anyways.
Yeah. The Minnesota Vikings hosted the Green Bay Packers, got the 27-25 victory. The Packers are only 11-5, but all 5 of their losses have come against teams that have 13 or more wins. They had 2 to the Vikings, 2 to the Lions, and 1 to the Eagles. How do we feel about them as contenders?
So I'm old enough to remember the NBA when teams had to learn how to win. You know, Detroit had to go against, maybe it was Houston for a couple years, get their butts kicked, then Detroit started winning. Then Detroit won a couple years, beating the heck out of Chicago, and then Chicago went and won a bunch. Then the Lakers had to learn how to win, and then they won a bunch. It feels to me like the Packers have some pretty good weapons at receiver. Somebody needs to step up one more level at least and be a consistent stud. Jordan Love, I think, needs to have somebody. I don't think he feels like he's got one guy that he knows when the shit's hitting the fan, this is who I'm going to. I don't think he has that guy yet, whether that's Dobbs or Wicks or Reed or Watson. That person isn't there, or that person hasn't developed. Josh Jacobs had a phenomenal year. I think he's sticking around. They've got a really good tight end in Tucker Kraft and a solid backup in Luke Musgrave. Love and one of those receivers have to take the next step to get them over the hump.
Meanwhile, for the Vikings, now 14-2. They have a big game coming up in Week 18. But I know they have J.J. McCarthy, but should they consider trying to bring Sam Darnold back?
I think they should. I'm not as high on McCarthy as a lot of other people. I think he's a game manager. I don't think he's, and while being a game manager with that set of weapons kind of makes it look good, I think Darnold has played really, really well. Bring him back, and, it's okay if McCarthy rides the pine next year too, if Darnold is playing well. Jordan Love was just fine doing that, and I understand you don't want to tie up a whole bunch of money. I don't know what the market's going to be for Darnold, but I think the quarterback needy teams, I think there's enough of them that it's going to be a significant market. But if Darnold gets some assurance that he'll be able to continue to start in Minnesota, I think he stays for a reasonable dollar amount. And maybe he ends up making McCarthy expendable and he starts to flourish and has that veteran blossoming Geno Smith for a few years. I don't know. We've seen Darnold be good and we've seen Darnold be bad. What we know is he's better than a lot of teams' quarterbacks.
Sunday Night Football saw the Falcons go to Washington to battle the Commanders. This one went to overtime as well, a 30-24 victory for the Commanders. Second start for Michael Penix Jr., 19-35, 223, a TD, an INT, 2 carries for 3 yards. He's going to be their guy in 2025. Are you excited, curious? How are you feeling?
I like Penix. I think he's got a nice arm. Made some really nice throws, but he made some really bad throws too. There were some that he just flat out missed, guys. Whether that's just not having enough time, being the backup for so many weeks, and now he's got a couple weeks and he's trying to rush through a season of experience and trying to fit it all into 2 or 3 games. I don't know. He knows who he's supposed to throw the ball to. Drake London, 13 targets. Darnell Mooney, 5. Not sure why Kaderil Hodge had 4 and Ray McLeod only had 1. But, but Bijan had 5.
Ray was the Kirk Cousins guy, so they had to.
They fought hard. I think that throw for the touchdown to Kyle Pitts was a beautiful throw. He stuck it right in. Pitts was covered pretty well, and Penix put that right on him. I think the game is still a little fast, and he hasn't hit that level of processing where everything is kind of slowed down. I'm happy with how he's playing right now. His completion percentage was down. I think he was about 67% in his first game, 54% in this one. I'm in. If I roster him, I'm not looking to get rid of him. I'd still like to go into next year in Superflex leagues with him as my QB3 because you just never know with young guys. So we'll see what happens.
Meanwhile, for the Commanders, Zach Ertz signed a 1-year veteran deal prior to the season. He has 61 receptions, 610 yards, and 6 touchdowns so far. Been a big part of the passing game for Washington. What do you think happens to him next year?
I think he's tight end 8 on the year or tight end 9 on the year. He's played really well. He gets open. He's not going to stretch the field, but
he's tight end 7 on the year.
He's going to be 35 next year or in the offseason. He's very much the tight end version of Adam Thielen. I think that we'll have to kind of see how Ben Sinnott develops. They spent a 2nd-round pick on him in the 2024 draft. He's waiting in the wings. Sinnott is a really good athlete. He's got a 9.73 RAS, relative athletic score. So he's a very good athlete. And there was a lot of, in the dynasty world, we're always focusing on rookies. So there was a lot of talk that Sinnott was going to basically take over this year. He didn't, which was normal for a tight end. And, but it wouldn't surprise me to see them splitting a lot more reps next year in the season as Sinnott grows into the position and continues to learn. I like Ertz. He's a depth guy that you're going to want on your team because he's productive. I don't think you're going to get a lot for him if you try to trade him. Conversely, I don't think you're going to spend a lot for him if you try to acquire him.
Final Monday Night Football game of the year saw the Lions go to San Francisco and get the 40-34 victory. Dennis, the Lions are 14-2. They are
one pride, baby.
The number 1 overall seed in the NFC. They've been favorites for most of the season. Are they still favorites in the NFC for you?
Nope. That defense we've lost so many people on that defense that you saw it yesterday against what's admittedly a mediocre San Francisco 49ers offense. No Christian McCaffrey, no Brandon Ayuk, no Trent Williams, no Jordan Mason. They're starting Chris Conley at wide receiver, and they put up 34 points against Detroit.
If they started Conley, it was because they're pissed off at Debo because they have Debo, Pearsall, and
No, I
Jamal
think
Jennings.
the first snap they had Debo in the backfield and Conley at wide receiver. So it's just Detroit's defense is so decimated by injuries that as much as I love the Lions, I just can't buy into them making a deep. They're the Cincinnati Bengals of the NFC. The defense. I mean, I guess the best thing that happened for that defense yesterday was that Terry and Arnold didn't have a pass interference call against him because he's usually good for 2 to 3 a game.
I still believe.
I'm pulling for him, and I'm going to pick him because my heart will make me do that. But the defense is just in rough shape. Now, they can score with anybody. The defense, the Lions are going to need Aaron Glenn to devise a defense that's going to be able to bend but not break. They're going to have to stop teams from scoring touchdowns. They're going to give up a ton of yardage, and hopefully they're getting field goals instead of touchdowns scored against them that will allow the Lions, if they can possess the ball, if they can score with shock plays, maybe we get Montgomery back. But hell, Craig Reynolds looked pretty solid yesterday being paired with Jahmyr Gibbs. And we saw Gibbs break off a touchdown there late in the game. I think we need Taylor Decker to be healthy. Hopefully, I want the Lions to get a bye because we need that week.
Meanwhile, rookie Ricky Pearsall, 10 targets, caught 8 for 141 and a touchdown. Was this a good sign for him going into 25?
I think so. It feels like they're going to be a little, I don't know, sour is probably too strong a word, but the way Pearsall played and the way Jennings played, and we're going to have Brandon Ayuk coming back, it doesn't feel like Debo's going to have a lot of room to get lippy.
No, I think Debo's going to get traded this offseason. Only 1 target yesterday. Yeah, not a great sign.
No.
That'll do it for us today. It is a little bit of a sadness for football fans. Thursday night games are over. There are 2 Saturday games, but there is not a NFL game for tonight and 3 more nights after this. So you may have some free time. Dennis, if people have free time and they're mourning the end of their fantasy season, what can they do?
Well, I'm not going to mourn the end of my fantasy season because I won 2 championships. So I feel good. I didn't win both of the Fantasy Football Roundtable podcast titles like somebody else I know that was bragging at the beginning.
It's never going to happen again.
So, but I did win 2. I won my longest running dynasty league.
Look, I pulled a Sean McVay to win the dynasty league. I don't have first or second round picks for like 3 years.
Oh, one of the leagues that I won, the Josh Bigby's Don't Get Any Flexes League, the DGAF. I don't think I have. I think that my next draft pick is like a 4th rounder in 2026.
Yeah. You got to do what you got to do.
Yeah. Anyway, what they can do while they're waiting for Ohio State to kick off at 5:00 tomorrow is they can go to their favorite podcast platform, hit that search bar, type in the Fantasy Football Roundtable podcast, give us a subscribe, give us a like. We got a big off season coming up.
True. A lot of college football playoff games. There's one that's just about to kick off right now tonight. It's Boise State and someone.
Penn State.
I knew I blacked it out. And then there are 3 good bowl games tomorrow. Wish everyone a happy New Year. Please stay safe and sane tonight for New Year's Eve. And we'll be back on Friday with a full preview of the Week 18 action. Until then, you guys have a wonderful week.